Hello everyone, welcome to episode 2 of the SwiftUI Devlog, and we're going to dive into some cool stuff in the app, but first, a thought. One of the hardest things about learning like a new skill or framework like I'm doing is not just learning the framework and like the code itself, but there's all these best practice type architecture questions that you have to answer too, and you don't know the basics well enough to really answer them. Now, at the company I work for, it's called Very Good Ventures. We're big Flutter experts. Like, we deep dive in Flutter, so we have all these best practices. Things like, how should you write your tests, and to what degree should you write those tests? How should you structure an app so you have nice separation of concerns and things like that? And because we've done this dozens of times at this point, perhaps hundreds, we know the patterns that work well, and especially in like a long-term setting. Since I'm learning a brand new thing here, that doesn't really exist yet, at least in my mind. I haven't been able to apply the concepts that I'm comfortable with into SwiftUI and kind of meld them with the existing concepts, what other people are finding successful. So there's some basics. I knew when I was doing Apple development, I'd want to do Swift because that's what is kind of the modern way to do it, it seems like. And also SwiftUI, while it seems not fully complete, it does seem like this is the way that things are going. That SwiftUI is improving every year, and down the road, it will be kind of the default choice. So I thought I'll start with kind of the first framework. But what about the back end, right? I'm at the point now where I'm not just making demo screens in the app. They're actual, like, real, useful UI elements, hopefully. Where should I store that data and in a production app? You know, I've used things in the past like Firestore, from Firebase, from Google Cloud. It's a great option. I've also used Supabase, which is great because it's like Firestore, but it's a relational database. But Swift has its own thing and kind of the whole Apple ecosystem. It's built off of core data, which has been in Apple platforms for a long time, as I understand, for kind of a data persistence thing. And then there's also CloudKit, which allows you to store data in the cloud, in iCloud specifically, that works with core data. So in theory, it should all be pretty easy. And they actually have this new thing just revealed last year called Swift Data. And it's supposed to be the new kind of, again, new thing where things are going, but maybe not 100% ready. So I thought, in keeping with how I've done things, I should just try Swift Data. That seems like the obvious answer, right? So how was it? I'm kidding. It wasn't that bad. But it kind of was hard. And I'm trying to figure out if it was just hard because all this stuff is new and that makes it hard, or if it was hard because I really should be using something else. So let's dive in. So I want to give a little update on how the app is going and just where I'm at with it. As you can see, first off, it has a name, Givingly. To be honest, it's a little bit work in progress name. If you have a better idea, definitely leave it down in the comments. But for now, I think that's good. A lot of the stuff I wanted to call it was already taken, to be super honest. And Givingly, it's kind of nice. My wife described it as you're giving gifts, and it's kind of lovely, which I suppose it is lovely to give gifts. So Givingly seems nice. And we have a really quick icon that I whipped up in Canva. Also a work in progress. I don't actually hate it, but it definitely needs some work. It's programmer art. So yeah, that's where we're starting there. And if we actually open it up, you can see we still have the same tabs that we had before, but there's a lot more content. First off, you can fully create a new event here. So I'll call my event maybe, I also use Harry Potter for all my test things, as you can tell for the most part. So we'll say this is Luna's birthday here. And we'll do balloons, but you can actually pick any icon. So I don't know, maybe Luna would like, you know what? Luna means moon. She would probably want the moon for her icon. And then you can also, just using the color picker from SwiftUI, choose a color. I'm going to go for like a nice orange, I think. And then you can, of course, give it a date and time. This is a little bit work in progress also because I don't think it really makes sense always to choose a time or things like that. But for now, this isn't a calendar app. It's just as simple saying, when is that event? And then you can also add people. So it actually looks like we haven't added Luna yet. So we'll add Luna Lovegood. I believe that's her name. I haven't read the books in a while. But we'll choose her. You see she pops up there, and then we'll create that. And it looks like that gets filtered into upcoming. Of course, we can click into it, edit it. There's a really cool thing in SwiftUI, this built-in rename functionality. So if for whatever reason I need to rename that, it's super, super kind of cool looking, I think. And of course we can always add more people, kind of everything you would expect. Then you also see we have the people view, where we have the people that we have added. If I click into Harry here, you can see a couple gift ideas that he has. We can also delete those too. And then you can also see we're pulling in the events that they're a part of. So we can click into here and actually see the details of their wedding here and actually edit them here. It's the same view that we saw just a second ago. So I think that's pretty cool. Again, you can rename them here just like that. And then this Me tab has been totally neglected so far. I want to completely rethink it. So I'm not sure what we're going to do with this. I've really been focusing on like the interaction of events and people and gift ideas. One of the things that I'm going to work on next is actually being able to add gifts to the event, gifts that you've already got. So right now you could kind of add ideas and organize what events you have to go to, but obviously part of this is tracking what you've already purchased and things like that. So we'll work on that next. Alrighty, let's start from the beginning with what is Swift data. If we're going to talk about it, let's start from the beginning and lay out so we're on the same page what it is. So first off, it's an ORM, or an object relational mapper. If you've never heard of an ORM, it's basically just a way for your code where you just have to write like classes and things like that, structs, and it will map directly to some sort of storage. So often this is used with SQL databases, things like Ruby on Rails has their like persistent record, and there's dozens of them. I believe it's called active record in the .NET world. Anyway, that's just an ORM. So Swift data, fundamentally, it's just an ORM. It's a way to model relationships and objects in code, in Swift code, obviously in this case, and it just is able to save them efficiently. So in this case, it's really primarily for saving data locally to a device, and it works with core data. So core data, like I said, has been around forever. And essentially Swift data is a way to really easily write Swift code and get it into core data. At least that's my understanding. And we'll take a look on how it works in a second, at least how you use it. But it's really easy, I think, in general. As far as the syntax is really easy. It also can integrate with CloudKit. So CloudKit is Apple's way to save data in iCloud in kind of a relational database, but it's not like Postgres or anything, MySQL or anything that you'd kind of think of. It is a relational database, but it's native to iCloud. And what's interesting is, as far as I can tell, the private user data, like that is not public for anyone to see, lives in their user's iCloud, and it's billed against like their iCloud storage amount. So everyone that has an iPhone gets a certain amount for free, and then people, that pay for more storage obviously can get more. And so that makes it a really interesting option, I think. If I'm understanding everything correctly, it's essentially a free storage. All right, I wanted to look at a little bit of code and actually look at how it works a little bit, or at least how you use it. I'll preface, this is not a tutorial. This is not like a how to use SwiftUI. There's a bunch of good ones out there that already exist. In fact, I've been following one that I'll link down below in the description. But for this is just kind of an overview, just to get you an idea if you've never seen it before. So it really starts with your models here. So in my case, I have this event model, for example. You can't make things a struct. They do have to be a class, actually, for this to work, which is kind of a bummer, but makes sense when you kind of dive into it. And then all you have to do, at least in theory, the minimum, is just put this app model at the end, and of course import Swift data. And this app model is a macro, so it actually generates a ton of code for you kind of behind the scenes that you don't have to worry about. Otherwise, this is just kind of a normal class. You have a date, name, icon. These are just properties on the class with some defaults in this case. We have a unwrapper here for the color for both setting and getting, because you can't store a color into Swift data. So we store it as like a string hex value. Still not sure that's the best way to do that, but like I said, we're figuring everything out. Other than that, this is really all it takes to define a model. You'll see there's some other things that we'll get to in a second, but we'll look at like another more simple one here for gift idea. You can see this is all it is. Then you notice you can reference other models in your model. So for example, this person is a model also, and here we have an event and we have an array of gift ideas, and actually we have an array of events. So that brings us to this at relationship here. So the at relationship defines your specific relationship rules between different models. So for example, between gift ideas and person, we're saying that when you delete a person, you should also delete the gift ideas, which I think makes sense in this case. And then you also specify what is the inverse property. So in this case, it's gift idea.person. And if we go to that references the person. You notice we don't do that on both sides. You're only supposed to do that on one side of a relationship, which I think is interesting. I'm not really sure why, but that's what I've read everywhere. It's just do it on one side. And yeah, this just sets up a more clear kind of relationship inside Swift data. It helps it store things appropriately the way you'd expect. And then, okay, so we have these models. How do we actually use them? So I'll look at like this events list view here, and you can see all we have is this at query for events, and just say, give me a list of events, and this pulls all the events into this parameter, which is pretty crazy, really. We can use those like in filter here, so we have some things to sort the soon events. Don't look at this logic. It needs cleaning up. I'm embarrassed about it. Don't look at it. It's a work in progress. But yeah, you can see, we use those different computed properties down there. So that's pretty cool. And then if we go into like the event, or actually let's go into the people list here. You can see the same thing. We're querying all the people. And I told you about those relationships down below here. So if we go to the event form, which is kind of the detail view for an event, you can see we have like the people that are linked here. All we have to do here is just say if let event.people is people, and this is the relationship. So all you have to say is just take the event.people. That's all it is, because it's just a property in the object. You don't have to think really about your joins or anything like that, because it's an ORM, which is pretty cool. And then here, we're just iterating over those people to display them. Now, if you want to add or mutate data, which obviously you'll want to, that's where this special environment comes in. So in this case, it's the model context. And I just assign that to a variable called context. And then if I scroll down to my create button, so if we're creating a brand new event in this case, all you just say is context.insert that event. And then when you want to like set properties on it, it's just a binding. So here we're binding event.date to this date picker. Here we have event.name is bound to this text field. Here we have event.icon, down somewhere. Oh, that's in the sheet. We'll look at that in a second. Event.color is bound to this color picker. And then, we have the sheet event.icon for choosing an icon. And that's all it is to mutate. If you want to delete, it's also really simple. Sorry, that's actually in the events section here. We have this button actually as a swipe action to slide to delete, and you just say context.delete and pass the object you want to delete. It's that simple, really. So we've seen this in my project. We've talked about it more generally. Do I think this is a good technology to use? Well, I have a pros and cons list.
Pro, you get to share your pros and cons list with the other nerds.
And I think that should clear everything up. First off, pro, it has a crazy simple syntax. I think obviously you've seen that. You just annotate some stuff as models, you just annotate some stuff as queries, and everything just kind of works. That's really easy. There's not a lot of code you have to write to get that working. Also, it persists in memory, the data, in memory, in storage, and in the cloud if you connect with CloudKit. That's pretty cool. I've written a lot of logic over the years to have stuff go from like state management to local storage and in the cloud. I think the only thing that comes close to this is probably like Firestore, but I even think this is a little bit cleaner than Firestore in a lot of ways because it's an ORM, right? You just annotate some stuff. Maybe when macros come to Flutter, maybe Firestore will steal some of the stuff. But for now, I think it's not worth looking down on the fact that it goes to memory and local storage and the cloud, just kind of all in the background. It's really cool. Also, something to consider, it's built by Apple, which means it'll probably get pretty good support from them, I would imagine. It's only 2 years old, so it still definitely has rough edges, but Apple tends to stick with stuff. They're probably using this in some of their own apps, or at least they will. I think that's definitely something to consider. The platform owner who owns the iPhone and also the SwiftUI framework is also building this, right? It has good support. Another thing, easy to overlook, it's free, right? Firestore is not free, Supabase is not free, basically none of those are, right? But this, as far as I can tell, for at least private data, is free, which is pretty slick. And also, maybe a minor point, but you don't need to sign in. Everything just works with your iCloud account. At least that's my understanding how CloudKit works. Obviously, Supabase, Firebase, all those other competitors, they have an authentication system that makes it super easy, but the fact you don't even have to put users through that, they can just kind of start using your app, not really thinking about where the data is going. I think that's really cool. I think that's a huge pro. Something that you probably wouldn't think about in most apps, but for something like I'm building, really nice to use. However, this is a pros and cons list, and I feel like I've been really positive in this video about it. I don't know, I'm a positive guy. I do think that there's some pretty big cons using Swift data, at least as it stands today. First off, I just hate ORMs. Maybe this is a personal thing. I've never liked ORMs. I think that they abstract away complexity that is inherent to the problem, right? Saving data in a relational manner is just kind of a hard thing in general. And I think ORMs oversimplify. They mean that you don't have to write like SQL statements yourself, which is cool, but you lose a lot of control and a lot of just understandability of what's going on. It's kind of my next point. It kind of works by magic. I don't really understand how putting at model suddenly makes it persist, or at query or whatever. I'm sure I could dive in deep and see how it works under the hood, and maybe I should do that. Maybe this is just me putting this bullet point is something, a problem with me and not with the framework. But it does feel really like there's a lot going on clearly to store it on device and with core data and with CloudKit that I didn't really have to think about to make it working. Part of that working by magic, I've found it has already led to some weird, frustrating bugs, just because I don't really understand what's going on. So when something breaks, it's hard to track down like what the heck even happened, because I'm not really sure how it's supposed to happen, right? When you break out of that really well-trodden path of like, hey, I have a model and I want to store it, but once you get into some relationship stuff or things like that, I found already edge cases where things just stop working, especially like working with the previews. It's kind of weird. I don't know. It definitely seems rough around the edges. Maybe I'll put it. Another big thing, I'm really into architecture. That's kind of one of my passions, architecture of applications. I have a problem with this, that there's not a clear separation of concerns, right? You're having your models are just kind of defined with your code, and all the logic for storing them, manipulating them happens kind of in your UI code. It's like tightly coupled together with your UI code. Now, there's not a lot of coupling code. Really, it's just like those bindings is the coupling code. So maybe it's not a problem, but it's kind of a code smell to me. The fact that I don't really know, again, what's happening, and it seems to all kind of happen in one file. It's not something I think you'd be able to unit test very well, for example, which to me makes me suspicious of like its long-term viability. I'm not saying it's bad, or I'm not saying I'll never be able to make it work kind of with that separation concerns, but as it is now and as I understand people are using it, it makes me a little nervous. And another like huge thing, it's not portable to other platforms, especially like the CloudKit stuff. So if I ever did port this app to Android, which honestly I'd like to do someday if it's like successful, if people seem to like it, I would love to, because I love Android and I have lots of family and friends on Android. The fact that using a proprietary Apple, not just like on-device saving caching model, but also CloudKit, and you're using iCloud, I imagine it's very difficult to port to other platforms. Whereas obviously Supabase, Firebase, it'd be like a no-brainer. You could easily move that stuff over. So overall, I mean, I think it's a good tool and it's an interesting tool, but it gives me a lot of alarm bells as I'm using it, to be honest. A lot of things that I'm genuinely not sure if it's a good strategy. Again, long term. Like for now, it's fine. But if this app is ever like an enterprise level app, I don't know if I'd trust it with something like Swift Data. And to be honest, I'm not sure that's what it's built for. So, conclusion time. Swift Data, am I sticking with it? I am for now. I'm not sure if it'll be a long-term thing, but I'm really glad I tried it out because I'm pretty familiar with Firebase and Supabase and those other tools. And so I'm glad I tried something new, something that works a lot differently, honestly, than I'm kind of used to. But I don't know if I'm going to stick with it long-term. Like, all those cons that I mentioned, they give me a lot of pause. I'm not sure when this app is like 5 years down the road how well Swift Data is going to work. So we're going to stick with it for now, but I could totally see myself switching to Supabase down the road. It does seem like I'll need a really relational data structure, so I think I'm going to stick with something SQL. But Firebase just announced that, they can do SQL stuff too now, so who knows what I'm going to end up with. Part of it too is I want to make sure that I have learned everything there is to learn, make sure I've kind of, if not mastered the skill, at least have a good understanding of its pros and cons. I've really only been using it for like 3 weeks. So before I abandon it, I just want to make sure I'm really confident that I'm making the right decision, that I understand it. And also, I just want to stay in that growth zone, right? We talked about last time. I want to keep pushing my skills. I feel like if I just go to Firebase, that'll be sticking in a comfortable zone, which if I was building a real production app for like a client, that's great. But I'm not. I'm really trying to do something wild, for me at least, something that I've never done before, and try to make the best decision along the way. And hopefully in the end, I'll have a big list of best practices, things that I think make a good SwiftUI app, and I can't wait to share those with you. So if you want to see that, make sure you subscribe, and while you're down there, drop a like if you like this video. If you found it interesting or helpful in any way, I'd really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.